The night had always been a companion to humanity, filled with silence, mystery, and fear, but now it carried something else, something alien. People first whispered about shadows that didn't belong, shapes stretching across walls and streets where no object cast them. At first it was dismissed as paranoia, the tricks of a restless mind in the dark. But then entire families claimed to see the same thing, shadows walking across their homes, bending unnaturally, never quite human, never quite animal, moving independently of any form that should have created them. They didn't move with the moon, they didn't match any lamp or tree, and they only appeared after the sun had sunk fully beneath the horizon, no matter how bright artificial light was. Once the night was complete, the shadows began to stir. The earliest reports came from a farming village where children screamed that something was crawling along the barn wall. Parents rushed out and saw nothing but the still night until the moonlight shifted, and there on the wooden planks, a jagged silhouette stretched like the shadow of an insect, impossibly large, twitching without origin. They tried shining flashlights, but the beam passed through the form and the shadow remained. Dogs refused to go near it. Chickens squawked and tore themselves apart trying to flee. Within hours, the entire village swore that the night itself had grown hostile. Neighbors laughed at them in the morning, until the same shapes appeared in their own fields the following night. By the end of the first week, rumors traveled faster than truth. Social media filled with grainy videos of stretching silhouettes bending across empty highways, of black figures standing motionless at the edge of forests. And yet, whenever investigators reviewed the footage, they found static, distortions, and corrupted files. It was as if cameras refused to acknowledge the shadows, leaving only terrified voices and broken images. Governments tried to reassure the public, blaming digital glitches, collective hallucinations, or hoaxes, but the whispers grew too many to silence. Something was stalking humanity in the hours of darkness, and no tool could capture its true form. In cities, night shift workers were the first to suffer. Security guards reported shapes moving across office walls where no one walked. Taxi drivers swore that tall shadows raced alongside their cars, keeping perfect pace though no figure was visible on the road. Construction crews refused to work late after one of their own vanished when he stepped across a moving shadow that stretched under a street lamp. The men shouted his name, but there was nothing left, only the still night and the lingering sense of being watched. Police records quietly marked him as missing, but every man on that site knew he hadn't simply disappeared. He had been taken. The phenomenon spread slowly but undeniably. First a village, then a city block, then entire regions where people claimed the shadows multiplied when the moon was full. They were not confined to one nation or one continent. Reports from South America matched those from Asia, Africa, and Europe. Everywhere the night fell, the shadows followed. Unlike storms or earthquakes, these events had no warning, no pattern except one constant truth. They came only at night. Daylight banished them completely, and even dawn's earliest rays dissolved them into nothingness, as if the sun itself was the only shield humanity had left. Scientists entered the discussion reluctantly, pressed by public demand and undeniable fear. Astronomers compared patterns in lunar cycles to the timing of the shadows. Physicists tried to explain them as light refractions, atmospheric distortions, or neurological phenomena caused by exposure to low-frequency vibrations. None of their theories held. The shadows weren't optical tricks. They were consistent, repeatable, and they left evidence behind. Floors were scorched where the shadows lingered too long. Walls grew cold to the touch, and plants withered when covered by them. Whatever the origin was, it was not natural. When scientists brought high-powered cameras to record the events, they found something more unsettling than failure. At the exact moment the shadows appeared, every device shut down simultaneously. Hard drives wiped clean, memory cards corrupted, batteries drained in an instant. Even analog film, developed later, showed nothing but blank sheets. The universe itself seemed to conspire to keep the shadows hidden from mechanical eyes, leaving only human witnesses with trembling voices to tell the story. The mystery deepened when historians uncovered strange parallels in ancient texts. Records from Mesopotamia spoke of night watchers who stretched across villages, carrying away souls beneath the stars. Egyptian carvings depicted long, distorted figures moving under moon. Indigenous legends across continents told of shadow people that walked when the world was dark. All these accounts, separated by oceans and centuries, described the same impossible phenomenon. Humanity had seen these things before, long before electricity and modern skepticism, but had buried them as myth and folklore. Now, the myths were walking again. Governments struggled to contain panic. News channels avoided the subject, issuing quiet directives to dismiss the shadows as conspiracy theories. Yet leaked documents revealed that entire task forces were deployed at night, equipped with high-intensity floodlights and experimental sensors. These teams never spoke publicly, but witnesses saw military convoys patrolling cities, turning stadium lights to full brightness, keeping entire districts awake until dawn. The unspoken truth was clear. Those in power were just as afraid as everyone else. The public, meanwhile, fractured into chaos. Some people locked themselves indoors after sunset, boarding windows and burning every lamp they could find. Others gathered in groups, chanting prayers, believing the shadows were divine punishments. Cults emerged overnight, worshiping the figures as ancient gods returning to reclaim the earth. Riots broke out in regions where blackouts occurred, with terrified residents begging for light to be restored before the shadows arrived. Darkness became the new enemy, and the simple act of nightfall turned the world into a battleground of fear. The most terrifying moment came when the shadows revealed a kind of awareness. In one city square, thousands gathered to protest the government's silence. As night fell, dozens of shadows emerged, stretching across walls and streets. At first they moved randomly, as they always did, but then slowly, they began to align, taking the unmistakable shape of human figures standing shoulder to shoulder. The crowd fell silent as the shadows mimicked their gathering. Some swore they even heard a low hum, a vibration in the ground. Panic erupted. People fled, and in the chaos, several were seen swallowed by the shadows, their screams cutting off abruptly. By morning, those individuals were gone without trace, their names added to the swelling list of the missing. From that night forward, the shadows no longer seemed like passive phenomena. They were watching, imitating, perhaps even communicating. The message was unclear, but the fear was undeniable. Humanity had no frame of reference for what was happening, only the growing sense that they were not alone, and that whatever shared the earth with them had chosen the night as its domain. The revelation of the signal changed everything. Before, people argued whether the shadows were tricks of the eye or mass hysteria. Now there was no debate. An intelligence had reached across the void to announce its presence, tied directly to the phenomenon that haunted the earth each night. The words, "Observation begins when the sun sleeps," echoed across every government hall, every research lab, and every terrified household. Humanity had long wondered if it was alone in the cosmos. That question was no longer a mystery. The real question, the one that gnawed at every waking mind, was why the Watchers had chosen to remain only in shadow. Fear became the new currency of the world. Entire cities turned nocturnal hours into lockdowns. Generators burned endlessly to flood streets with light. Stadiums stayed lit all night, and skyscrapers left every floor blazing as a defiance against the unknown. Yet despite every effort, the shadows still appeared. They slid across walls even in well-lit rooms, stretching beneath doors, clinging to ceilings. People realized light was not a shield, only a delay. The Watchers had mastery over darkness, and no human invention could stop night from falling. Religions fractured under the weight of the revelation. Some declared the shadows were angels returning to judge mankind. Others called them demons, manifestations of sin. Entire sects broke away, forming cults that welcomed the Watchers, holding midnight vigils where they extinguished every flame and waited in open fields for the shadows to descend. Many never returned from those gatherings. Videos captured from a distance showed silhouettes converging, followed by sudden silence. At dawn, the fields were empty except for discarded clothing and offerings. The cult spread faster than containment efforts, promising salvation to those who embraced the shadows willingly. Governments scrambled for control. Leaders held press conferences, urging calm, but their voices shook. Military convoys rolled across nations, setting up floodlights and barriers, herding populations into secure zones. But security was an illusion. People vanished nightly. Families locked in fortified homes would awaken to find one member gone without a sound, their last footprints ending at the edge of a strange, elongated silhouette. The message was clear. Walls could not keep the shadows out. Humanity was prey in its own home. The scientific community pressed forward despite the terror. Teams of physicists, astronomers, and engineers collaborated globally, desperate to understand the phenomenon. They noticed patterns. The shadows intensified when the moon was high, when cloud cover was thin, when the earth lay fully exposed to starlight. This was not random. It suggested a system, a method, as if the watchers required a certain condition of night to function. Observatories trained instruments skyward, and slowly, pieces of the puzzle emerged. Above the atmosphere, faint distortions rippled across the stars, bends in light too deliberate to be natural. Something vast was stationed beyond sight, cloaked perfectly except when moonlight reflected at impossible angles. The shadows were not native to Earth. They were projections, extensions of ships or entities in orbit, manipulating light and matter to create their presence below. The discovery should have brought relief. To know the enemy was not supernatural, but technological meant it could be understood, possibly fought. Yet the opposite occurred. If this was technology, then it was centuries, perhaps millennia beyond human capability. To bend shadows like strings, to infiltrate every corner of darkness, to erase people without trace. This was not merely advanced science. It was domination. Humanity was not just being watched. It was being controlled. Attempts at communication grew frantic. Radio telescopes broadcast messages of peace, mathematics, music, and pleas for understanding. Every major language was sent into the void. The only reply was silence, punctuated each night by the growing number of shadows across the earth. Then came the imitation. People noticed that the shadows no longer moved randomly. They mirrored human activity with uncanny precision. When crowds gathered, the shadows formed their own gatherings. When soldiers marched, shadows fell into ranks beside them. When children played, shadows flickered in similar motions, distorted parodies of joy. It was not dialogue in words, but a chilling reflection, as if the watchers studied humanity by becoming its dark mirror. The imitations grew bolder. Protesters demanding answers found their chants echoed by vibrations in the air, low sounds resonating in their bones. Emergency broadcasts were overridden by a single phrase repeated in dozens of voices, both male and female, both familiar and alien. We are watching. Terror reached its peak when entire neighborhoods witnessed their own shadows stepping out of sync, breaking away from their bodies, lingering independently even as the original forms moved on. People fled screaming, abandoning homes and cities. The exodus at night became global, highways clogged with cars trying to outrun the dark, though none could escape the rotation of the earth. Night fell everywhere. Eventually, then came the disappearances en masse. At first it was individuals, a worker, a child, a lone traveler. Now it was groups, families vanishing together, entire villages erased overnight. No sound, no struggle, only the hollow emptiness of spaces once alive. The watchers were not simply observing, they were selecting, and yet no one knew by what criteria. Rich or poor, young or old, guilty or innocent, it did not matter. The shadows chose, and the chosen were gone. Despite the hopelessness, resistance stirred, not out of courage, but survival. Secret enclaves of scientists and engineers gathered to experiment. They discovered something strange. While shadows infiltrated lighted rooms with ease, concentrated beams of high-frequency light disrupted their coherence. Lasers scattered them, forcing their forms to flicker and retreat briefly. It was not a weapon, not yet, but it was a chink in the armor. Word spread quietly, whispered between soldiers and rebels. Perhaps the watchers were not invincible after all. Experiments continued, and another discovery emerged. When a human being stepped deliberately into a shadow, something unexpected happened. Most vanished, yes, as before, but a few resisted, not by technology, not by light, but by sheer willpower. Their bodies trembled, their minds screamed, but they remained. The shadow engulfed them, tried to consume them, yet somehow they walked out alive, scarred but unbroken. Animals, when pushed into the same condition, were instantly annihilated. Only humans displayed this defiance, this flicker of resistance that no shadow could fully extinguish. It was as if the Watchers had designed their observation to measure that very trait. The implication was profound. Humanity was not simply prey in an alien zoo. It was a test subject of an experiment far older and deeper than anyone imagined. The Watchers had chosen the night as their stage, not to destroy mankind instantly, but to study how it fought, how it broke, how it endured. And in that endurance lay the first spark of rebellion,